Today we are going to be doing a bearing replacement on a giant Trance. Now this is the alloy Trance, but this is going to be the same whether it's carbon or alloy, or if you have one of the other Maestro suspension bikes like the Rain or one of the Live bikes. Everything's going to be the same. I'm going to do a few of these with the Maestro specific bearing kit. And I'm going to do one of these with some improvised tools because I know that's what a lot of people are going to be using. And we'll talk about what bearings are made up of and what to look out for on them. So I hope you enjoy. So here we have the official Maestro bearing extractor and installer set. This I absolutely love, and I wish I could find more of these individual ones aftermarket for other systems. But each of these different tools consists of a bolt and nut, consists of a couple of receivers. Now this is the exact size that fits one of the bearings. There's lots of different sizes for different size bearings. And this is what the bearing gets pushed out of the frame into. And then you have your actual press tool. This is what pushes on the race of the bearing. It can be flipped either way depending on what the need is. So it's going to push the bearing out of the frame into that receiver. Alright, so if we can take a close look at this, all the bearings, almost all bearings, all the bearings that you're going to have on your bicycle at least, are going to have a little number here. Now sometimes this number is kind of a standardized system, like this one here is a 6900. Sometimes they're going to be just the dimensions of the bearing. This one right here, because it's a very, very common size, it just has that 4-digit number. And this bearing is sealed on both sides. Now that's not a perfect seal, but it's a decent one. So most of the lubrication we're going to put on here isn't really to get in the bearings and lubricate the bearings. Most of the lubrication is just to help add a little bit more protection to the seal by putting that grease in to keep all the water out. This is the bad one. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this cover off. I don't really recommend you do this on a good bearing because it can actually damage some of it. Alright, so if we see inside here, we still got some of that Teflon grease in there. And then we've got all of our roller bearings. Now, if we look at this, all of these bearings, you see they're rolling, contacting the inner and the outer rings. They call those the races. The race is actually the piece that the bearing itself is contacting on the inside. On these bearings, either the roughness is either because the ball bearings are damaged themselves, maybe they're rusted and pitted, or the races are damaged. Either way, these things are pretty cheap, and it's usually better just to replace them instead of trying to clean them out and re-grease them. One thing that to remember in these is that when we have this installed, this inner part should be pretty well fixed on whatever it's attached to, and then this outer part should be very fixed on what it's attached to, and really all the movement happens inside these little roller balls. And I'll go into a little more detail later about why that's important, but the really important thing is that we hold on to one piece, hold on to the other piece, and let the balls do all the movement. Okay, so one thing I want to note about this bearing, I've taken both of the seals off of it, and as you can see all the way through, and there really isn't anything connecting this outer race to the inner race. It's just the fit of these ball bearings being in there tightly is what holds this thing together. So when you're pressing one of these out of the frame, you're pushing on just that inner race, which is putting pressure on those bearings, and it's helping pull the outer race out of its fit, its press fit, and it puts a lot of strain on this thing. So there is always the chance that when you're pressing these bearings out, in this particular case, that you can damage them. So this isn't something you necessarily want to do unless it's already a bad bearing that you need to remove to replace. That being said, now I have my good bearing here, and a couple of important points about pressing the bearing in. When we were pressing using this press tool to press, is it focus? Okay. When we were using this press tool to press the bearing out, we were pushing on it right in the middle. Now you see the press tool is not contacting the outer piece at all, and that's because it just doesn't fit. The outer piece isn't exposed from the inside of that recess. But when we press this back in, we don't want to put all that extra strain on the middle race, on the inner race. We want to press against the outer race. So that's what this side is for. And this side is the exact same size. Well, it's very, very close to the same size, but it's big enough that it contacts that whole outer race so that we can guarantee that it doesn't put too much pressure on the inner race and damage the bearing. Okay, so actually in use, what we have here, you see this is the side that is the exact size of the outer of the bearing. So this is where we're going to be pressing out. We're going to be coming this way towards us. And then inside here, if I can get the light right, you can see in here the hole is much, much smaller. This is enough room to fit, or to have a little bit of room for that inner race, but not enough room for the bearing to actually pass through. So what we're going to do is we are going to take this piece, which is almost the exact size of that hole, put it there, and then we're going to take this piece and we're going to put it on this side. And then what's going to happen is that the bolt is going to squeeze these two together and cause that bearing to get pushed into this receiver. Now I want to do this very, very carefully because there's two kind of sharp points right here, and if we're not careful, it can scratch that carbon or chip the paint, which is just a cosmetic issue, but we just want to be careful that it doesn't happen. And as you can see, that bearing is getting forced into our little bearing receptacle there. And now we can unscrew the whole assembly. And you can see that our pressing tool has pushed all the way through, and then our bearing has been dropped into our little bearing receptacle. Looks like it's pretty icky inside there, so let us clean it out and get all that gunk out so we can start from a nice, clean, pristine starting point. One of the other interesting things about the Maestro bearing kit is that this extractor portion here, well, when you flip it over, this is a guide to help you keep it straight when you're installing it. So this actually fits under here, and it fits exactly in that spot, so that there's no movement of the bolt on the inside there, and it doesn't allow it to wander or anything. It gives you a very, very straight fit. So I've prepared the fitting surface, the bearing surface, by cleaning it and putting a little bit of grease on there. And like I mentioned before, the grease in this case is not there to help lubricate anything. It might help lubricate the install a little bit, but really the point of it is to help prevent the carbon from chemically bonding to the steel outer race of the bearing. It's also there to help prevent moisture from being able to get around the outside of here and corrode that bearing surface. So always put some grease on there. And so now we have our guide on the inside, and we have our press tool on the outside. And we just get that so it's hand tightened, and then fit the remainder of it with the wrenches. And it should go in there very, very easily because we're using the appropriate tools. Put it in there until you feel it catch the other side, and then back off. It does not have to be super tight. You just want it to be fully seated in there. And we can see here on the back that it's fully seated. There's no more room there. And now we do the other side. All right, there we go. Looks good. All right, so as you can see on these, this is the lower of the rear swing arm. These bearings are also shot and need to be removed, and just like the bearings on the upper rocker, these bearings go from the inside to the outside. So what we need to do is we need to place the press tool on the inside, and we need to place the receiver end on the outside here, and then just squeeze them together. Now, as you can see, I've got the bolt end here on the inside. Where possible, I like to put the bolt end on the press tool because it's okay if this spins, but it's not okay if this piece here spins, because that would scratch up the frame. Okay, and just like before, we're going to use this side to press the bearing out. We're going to use this side to press the bearing in. Now, as you can see, this bolt is much, much smaller than the inside of that bearing. So, what we have here is this little carrier that fits very, very snugly right there. And then the bolt fits snugly into that carrier, so everything is lined up perfectly straight. And then on the inside, just like we had before with this piece, we can flip it over and it gives us a nice center to press into. You can see inside there that it's pressed in all the way and there's no gap. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, these things, they press in easy enough that you don't even have to use the wrench. You see, it's just friction that's holding this in place, and this thing is pressing in just fine. Now, if you can press this in by hand without the use of any kind of tools, then you've got some real problems on your hands, because this bearing is not supposed to be able to move in there at all. It should be a press fit bearing. Everything looks good. Folks, this is the part of the video where I urge you not to do this at home, because there's a very, very high likelihood that you can damage your frame permanently. So I do not recommend you try this at home. And now I'm going to show you how to do this at home. We talked about before, when you're extracting these bearings, you have to push on that middle race. But when you're installing the bearings, you have to push on the outer race. So the tool for the job for the home gamers that want to hack their way into this is a couple of sockets. This particular socket is a 3/8 inch and it fits inside that hole very, very well, and then stops. And then I checked already that this outer diameter fits inside this portion so that it will be able to successfully push this out. And again, I cannot recommend enough that you do not try this way at home. We're going to put this nested right in there. You can use your wrench. I have this little extender. Really importantly, I have these wood blocks here. The wood is much, much softer than this metal, so while hammering into it, it's very, very, very unlikely that the wood is going to damage this paint job. Otherwise, I would not do it. There we go. So as you can see here, we didn't scratch anything. Everything is perfect as it was before, and our bearing is removed. Let's get the other side now. Now for the part you've all been waiting for. How are we going to get these things back in? So just like before, we need to have something that presses from the outside on the outer race of the bearing. And then we need to have something that presses up against the frame on the inside. And what I have here in my improvised tool collection is another socket wrench. This is an 11/16. It is ever so slightly smaller. I don't know if you can see that on screen, but it's ever so slightly smaller than the diameter of the bearing. And what we're going to do is press up against this washer on the inside with the good old C-clamp. This particular one, I don't know where it came from, but millennia ago it lost its little press end here, which is convenient because it fits just on that washer. This is not the easy way to do it. This is the desperate way to do it. Okay, so what we have here is we have a bearing that is trying to walk a little bit on us. It's not very good. So now that our bearing is crooked, you can see that on the camera, our bearing is in there crooked. We need to take it back out and try again. You know, I think my issue may be with this very, very cheap socket. Let me see if I can find another one. Okay, I found another socket. This one is a little bit flatter. It's a 17 millimeter. Still fits that diameter very, very well. So let's just get that pushed in. So the issue is we don't have anything to keep it straight. I also think that this being a recess, it's not sitting flat on this surface. So let me see if I can resolve that. I have added another washer to the mix. This one is going to go right here. And hopefully this will solve our uneven issue. I'm gonna have to think about this. Just like my dear old mom used to say, when all else fails, hit it with a hammer. So what we're gonna do here is we are going to put this centered on here, and we are just gonna gently tap it in. And if it starts going in at a little bit of an angle, then we will tap the other side and straighten it out. I think we have this seated enough that we can go back to using our press rig. Let's see if this works out any better for us. Okay, that didn't help much. Back to hammering. Okay, it looks like we've got it all the way in there. The bearing feels really smooth. No big deal, right? All right, folks, thank you for coming out and joining me today in the shop. I hope you learned a little bit about how to remove and install some bearings. I will get to a video of me putting the whole Maestro suspension system back together because I know a lot of you really want that. If you like the video, like it. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. If you have any specific things that you would like to see, please get in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'm going to leave you with the individual bearing sizes for each of the 12 bearings, or should I say each of the 6 pairs of bearings on this particular system. It is going to be, this is a giant Trance aluminum from 27.5 from 2019 model year. This is going to apply to all of the 27.5 Trance and Trance Advanced models from 2017 to 2021. The lower shock bearing for the frame is a 6802. The upper rocker arm has 2 sets of bearings. The lower bearings that mount to the frame are 6900. The front bearings that mount to the top of the trunnion mount shock are 63800. The rear triangle has 2 sets of bearings. The lower bearings are 6902 bearings, and the upper bearings are 6900 bearings.